There was just kind of this intrinsic desire to lead and to create an impact for people who were suffering. And that was one of my biggest driving factors in how I would say I kind of went about creating change, is remembering why I was doing what I was doing and what I was trying to believe in or create along the way.
That's Catharine Bowman, an accomplished medical researcher, board member, medical student, speaker, and change agent. And she's only in her early 20s. At 8 years old, she made a promise to her mother that she would develop one of the first pharmacological treatments for lymphedema, an incurable and painful disease that is often a result of cancer treatments. That journey to find a solution began by connecting the dots around the trends, challenges, and opportunities to create that necessary traction.
So it was really about trying to split things up. So looking at lymphedema on its own, what is this particular condition? Let's look at it from multiple angles. It's not just tissue swelling and all of these different things. It's also a holistic experience. What does this mean for the patient? What does this mean for their families? So always breaking things down and analyzing from multiple angles was certainly something that I had tried to do, and being able to test something out and learn from it. And I was developing that skill of connecting the dots over a period of time.
So how did Catharine learn to spot the trends that set her down the career path to becoming the world's youngest lymphedema researcher? And how did she create a parallel path to building her career Mashup that not only has enabled her to align her broader goals of supporting patients, not just on the medical front, but also the psychological, social, and emotional side? Welcome to Strategic Momentum, the pod course with actionable tips, inspiring stories, and practical advice from progressive leaders on what it takes to break through business and career inertia and understand the business of work. I'm your host, Connie Steele. We all have goals that we want to achieve in work and in life, but oftentimes we aren't sure where to start. There is a need not only to bring our whole selves to work, but also to deliver meaningful impact. Yet, the task at hand can feel insurmountable. Catharine Bowman knows this all too well. Her decision to actively pursue that dual path began at the youthful age of 13. Compassion is what started her journey, and it was a source of stability through her constantly changing environment. So let's learn more about Catharine's mission-driven career Mashup based on compassion, connection, and bringing the human element back to bench science.
I'd say my career journey actually started quite early on when I was 8 years old. With my mom was diagnosed with stage 3 melanoma, so an aggressive form of skin cancer. And at that point, she underwent surgery to her lymphatic system to try to treat this cancer. And as a result, developed an incurable lymphatic system disease called lymphedema. And so I witnessed my mom really struggle with this illness and all sorts of ways, whether that was the physical symptoms of lymphedema, things like swelling, discomfort, pain in her lower limb, and then also kind of the psychosocial changes. You know, she used to be a piano player, and as a result of all the discomfort that she's experiencing, you know, she's not able to sit down at the piano anymore and play. So yeah, as a young person, I was witnessing all of these different changes, and myself and my 3 older brothers are always looking to be able to help and support where we can. And so I made a promise to my mom that kind of set off a chain reaction in my professional path, and I think also my personal life as well. And I had promised her that I would develop one of the first pharmacological treatments for her incurable disease. I would say that was certainly a big milestone at the beginning, because that was, I'd say, the fire that lit the spark within me of wanting to care for my mom in this different way. And recognizing also that, I mean, from a medical perspective, unfortunately, a lot of doctors don't necessarily recognize lymphedema or know how to treat it. And so it was also in terms of wanting to, you know, somehow find community within even just our family surrounding what my mom was experiencing at that point. I started to seriously consider undertaking this promise I had made to my mom when I was 8, around the time I was 13 years old. And so I was doing science fairs as a young person and thought, well, this could be a great platform to be able to actually pursue this particular idea I had of trying to develop the first pharmacological treatment for lymphedema. And so I started to read and put together basically a research proposal that was a combination of all these different ideas I had over time of, what is lymphedema in terms of a biomechanical type of processes, what are similar diseases to this particular condition, and what types of compounds might I be able to incorporate into a drug treatment. And so, I started to do that, worked with a PhD candidate that I had met through our local science fair and put together a research proposal and had sent this to research labs all across my home province of Ontario. And that was another big milestone, having a tangible written piece out that was outlining my idea to develop this treatment. I got, some lovely responses back from researchers who said, Catharine, this is a great idea. But unfortunately, I don't do lymphatic research and I don't know anyone who does. And so, it's
but that shows
those,
a white space. Clearly that you
Yeah.
put so much thought and analysis into this that this just highlights the fact that there's a huge opportunity to solve an incredible need, and you're the one who can help fill that need.
Exactly. Yeah. And so for me, I think it was another, that unto itself, even a milestone or something definitely that I note within my mind as a very important piece of my mom as she kind of progressed through her lymphedema. And I know this is the case for many patients. They're looking for community. And unfortunately, we don't have necessarily the same degree of say, a medical community that other chronic diseases may have. That the knowledge there's certainly a knowledge gap there that we as researchers and as clinicians really do have the opportunity to make meaningful change within this particular community and bring people together for projects like I was trying to pursue.
What I also find so interesting is that you were connecting the dots, not just in a clinical way where you knew that there wasn't a treatment for lymphedema, but you were also thinking about the whole person, not just the medical treatment to address that root problem of swelling and inflammation and that unfortunate discomfort, but the psychological aspect of it, the need for human connection, just a very multifaceted way of looking at the problem versus, I think in many instances, people just laser focused on the one thing.
Yeah. And I think that's, certainly something that continues to motivate me is this need for connectivity and compassion when we're, say undertaking something that is often seen as very much so needs to be objective. Let's say something like drug research, where it's bench science. You need your objective measures. And it's really important from my standpoint to be able to consider, where is your work going? What does it mean to be, say, a compassionate bench scientist? What does that mean for each person involved in the process and along the step of the way? So, yeah, I kind of had developed, getting into the progression of things, developed this research proposal, recognized this major gap. And so I started to reshape my research proposal to fit into a laboratory around the time I was 14 or 15 at McMaster University, actually, and was working there with a researcher, kind of looking at the immune system and how this might be impacted by these particular compounds I had identified as a potential treatment for lymphedema, knowing our lymphatic system is very much tied to our immunity as well. So started working there, and as I was continuing to work there, one of the only lymphatic researchers in Canada who lives here where I'm at now, which is in Calgary, heard about the 14-year-old trying to cure lymphedema and invited me to move across the country and work with him. And so I did that. After the summer of grade 10, I moved here and started to pursue this project. And we've worked together for the past 8 years. And over the course of that, certainly have expanded kind of the research efforts beyond just the pharmacological side of things. I was able to, kind of expand things into the realm of psychosocial oncology. So looking at that psychological and emotional and social experience of lymphedema. Now working with 2 different groups on surgical treatment of lymphedema. So that's kind of a next phase of these projects. And, as you said, like really trying to build a holistic understanding of what lymphedema means to people and how we can truly make a difference as a collective in moving forward, both in terms of drug treatment, but just being there with one another and building community for people and finding that support that is so needed within this community. So yeah, those are the big milestones, I would say.
Spotting the opportunities to make a difference and overcoming the challenges was something that Catharine was squarely focused on. She knew there was a knowledge gap with respect to potential treatments and ways to provide community support for those suffering from the disease. Her journey to find the treatment that she works on today began with a lot of research about the disease with her mom, who happened to have a medical background. Through this extensive research, she developed an understanding of lymphedema as well as the lymphatic system. As a result, this desire to acquire broad and deep knowledge helped her identify a solution from an unlikely source, a gardening magazine. And that aha moment was the start of her actively pursuing her career path at 13.
It was through a lot of wonderful reading and mentorship, and specifically like looking at, these kind of medical, they were journal articles. My mom had a background in palliative care nursing. And so we have these kind of beautiful memories of me going upstairs to visit her while she was, say, resting her lymphedema leg. And I'd be trying to figure out, I don't understand this article. Like, what do you think? And I would just go and sit with her and we would work through advanced medical journal articles when I was 13 or 14. And she was able to show me like, oh, this is what this word means, or maybe you should look up what they're trying to say here. And so between the two of us, in terms of just like a really special bonding experience as I was kind of looking through how I would test things, and then the actual compounds themselves, I had read in a gardening magazine about particular flower called the lupin flower, and that it had very strong anti-inflammatory properties. And, with childlike innocence and very much good light in my mind, I thought, well, my mom's inflamed. Why don't we just put these compounds on her and see what happens? And of course, that's not actually what I did. And very much inflammation is more complicated than that. But read about this flower, wrote out to the author of that particular article I was reading in this magazine and said, what are the most active compounds? And he gave me, a big list. And I just started reading through them. And a couple of them had been used in trials for similar conditions that were similar to lymphedema. And then there was one that I also just picked by chance. And that is the one that I continue to really focus my research on today. So it was, a really interesting alignment of very much hard work and lots of reading. But there was kind of this chance alignment that happened as well. And as I read more about that compound, that I was like, this one sounds cool. Kind of evidence came through that was like, oh, this is very much a very intriguing compound to be looking at. So yeah, that was kind of the process behind that, certainly.
Well, and that chance situation of coming across that article in a gardening magazine wasn't something that was ever planned. It was,
no.
From what I understand, it was something that you saw on the table, and all of a sudden you're reading this gardening magazine that just happened to be there that your mom got, and you connected the dots because you had been researching lymphedema for so long and every aspect of it. And it was you bridging the gap in different areas in which many people wouldn't have even thought of that possibility. And you not feeling encumbered necessarily by exploring solutions in different places. And so, one of the things that I had always sensed from you when we've talked before is that you have this innate test and learn mentality. Where do you think that comes from?
I was raised in a family with 3 older brothers and my 2 parents, and mom and dad are very much natural leaders in the sense of they wanted us to try something. And if it didn't feel right, we were able to step away from it after we gave it our best go and look to, okay, what might be a better fit for you in terms of, everything from piano lessons to what our next science fair project would be as kids. Like, they very much fostered that, try it out type of mindset and wanted us to be, I think they wanted to nurture our gifts and our talents. And it might not be that you find your thing right away. And I think that goes for, it also changes over our lifetime, what feels right in terms of our passions and our pursuits. And so they always were looking out for us as kids, making sure that we were continuing to examine our gifts and what felt would be a good pursuit for us in our lives. So yeah, certainly from them, I would say.
I know you also mentioned that you never felt boxed in or limited by any kind of label. So just because, you were young, that didn't mean that you couldn't pursue this pretty lofty, goal.
Yeah.
And you had this very supportive village that was fostered early on with the support of your family and with others.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it, when they say it takes a village, I very much had a wonderful village and very, very much still do. And yeah, it was oftentimes, being the youngest daughter and the only daughter in the family, this concept of labels and boxes. And my parents, wanted us to recognize that our potential and our drive can transcend the boxes that unfortunately I think people are put in inevitably in their lives. And that was a big piece that I think I've taken with me on my journey is realizing, you may be the youngest or you may be a woman in a more male-dominated field, but don't let that limit you to the best of your capacity and really be an advocate for change in regards to allowing people to not just be viewed by the label that we place on them, but for the change that they want to make.
And she never let those standards of conformity box her in her pursuits. Parallel pathing was also something that Catharine did at an early age. She developed a way to pursue both her educational and scientific career while in high school, and even found that they aligned and melded together. It's something that she continues to do today, as she not only is a researcher, she's also a medical student, board member, and speaker, in addition to the many other roles and areas she's involved in. She never saw any of her roles and jobs as one where she had to narrowly focus on one path or another. In fact, she knew these would fulfill all sides of her, so she could be her whole self. And today, she continues to pursue multiple career paths that help her fulfill her higher order mission and goals.
Well, it's been 8 years since you have been a researcher. You're also not just a researcher too. You have multiple roles and careers, I would say, that you have been mashing up together. So tell us about everything that you are, doing now and how you even got to the path of working on multiple things that you are currently working on now.
Yeah, my other hat certainly is I'm the vice president of the Alberta Lymphedema Association. And so we're an advocacy group that looks to really support and empower people who are impacted by lymphedema, to provide education to people who are either living with the condition or caring for someone with the condition, all these different aspects. And so I got involved with the group because as a young person, I had been kind of doing almost like speaking events and talking about my journey and about innovation and about lymphedema, and started to do that when I was about 15 or 16 at medical conferences. And it kind of just expanded beyond medical conferences over time, and realized how much I loved advocating for change and wanting to work with other people to create meaningful change and build community. So I joined the group in 2016 as a board director, and then in the last year or so, took on the vice president role.
How old were you when you joined as a board member in 2016?
17, 16,
wow.
17. Yeah. an incredible group of people to work with, honestly. A lot of it is patient-driven and patient-led work. And so we're able to do some really wonderful things together. Yeah, so I am the vice president there. I'm also a medical student here in Calgary as well. And that kind of came over time of, I'd been working in research, but realized how much I truly loved that human connection that we had talked about early on. I had met, actually, I remember the first time I had met a lymphedema patient. Well, it was their family members. And it was the first time I had met someone impacted by lymphedema who wasn't my mom. And this was when I was quite young. I was still a science fair kid.
And that science fair kid was 13, 14 years old,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, I had met them, and there was just this amazing energy that almost like an energy exchange that happened between myself and this mother and father of an 8-year-old who had lymphedema. That to me, I think, would signify my start or my interest in medicine. Although I think at that point I was still having a conversation with my mom of, I'm not sure I would necessarily want to be a doctor, but I really love this research side of things. And over time, the more I was connecting with people, the more I realized that, no, I think, being a medical doctor and pairing that with my research would be a really meaningful direction for me to pursue. And so, yeah, I started medical school. Yeah, those are kind of I would say my two other big hats. I'm an advocate, very much so, and speaker. So I do different speaking gigs, and topics are ranging from great lymphedema education with patient groups and healthcare provider groups, all the way to some work with government, and then with kind of general entrepreneurial mindset and innovation, those types of things for different, whether that's corporate or medical audiences or just the general public.
And it also says, I understand you're a project lead for the Division of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery too, for this University Health Network as well.
Yeah. So I'm also, and that ties into kind of the research efforts that I undertake as a lymphatic researcher is looking at kind of the surgical side of lymphatic disease. And so I've, been privileged enough to take on and lead this project within that the division of plastic surgery there. And we're looking at basically patient outcomes in terms of lymphedema and quality of life after they undergo a particular type of treatment to see if we can alleviate their lymphedematous symptoms. So, yeah.
You have quite the career mashup there, I would have to say.
Thank you.
Creating this career mashup took a plan. It wasn't a big bang approach. It began with that goal in mind, doing that necessary research and analysis to holistically understand the problem she was trying to solve, and then building the compass to deliver against the specific objectives she set. It was about breaking up the problem into smaller parts, then testing, learning, and even pivoting throughout the whole process. All the while, she built out a village of support and developed valuable hard and soft skills that have led her to doing what she does today. And her measure of success wasn't a hard and fast timeline or number, as she shares.
There was just kind of this intrinsic desire to lead and to create an impact for people who were suffering. And that was one of my biggest driving factors in how I would say I kind of went about creating change, is remembering why I was doing what I was doing and what I was trying to believe in or create along the way. And so big concepts of compassion and empathy certainly were motivating me throughout this, of seeing a gap in care and wanting to fill that gap. I also very much so had found my love for networking and building connection, not only with whether that's patients or families, but kind of almost like a business mindset with the science that I was undertaking as well. And just absolutely loved entering into conversations with, senior researchers or clinicians and talking about how we could put our brains together to create something really powerful. So it was all these almost things that I was learning about myself along the way. And I remember it was a similar sort of feeling that of when I met the patient's family members at the science fair. When something really clicked for me, it was like this full body energy that had taken over that really made me feel like, okay, I am on the right path and I'm going to continue pursuing this path. And as much as I face barriers along the way, if I can remember why I'm doing what I'm doing in terms of compassion and connection and making a difference for people, I can overcome those barriers and continue on my journey.
What's interesting to me is that your measure of success along the way was a feeling. Because you didn't have, at the time, there wasn't clarity on very tangible metrics. Plus, this was an area in which still untapped. So there weren't any benchmarks for you to go off of, but it was for you personally along this journey, it was that sensation and feeling where you could sense that alignment of your passion and your purpose as you were defining how to achieve this very clear goal that you had for yourself. But I know one other thing that you mentioned is that you started by breaking up the problem, though, into smaller pieces. Huge undertaking for anybody to solve a very challenging problem. So tell me a bit more about that and how you went about just even knowing how to do that.
Yeah, totally. We look at our quote unquote big idea, and it is just this oftentimes maybe insurmountable looking type of pursuit. And so in my case, I was like, I am going to try to develop one of the first drug treatments for this disease, amidst also very much having that disease touching home in a different way for me. And so it was really about trying to split things up. So looking at lymphedema on its own, what is this particular condition? Let's look at it from multiple angles. Of course, there's this very much psychosocial component, but even within the biomedical processes and the pathophysiology, there's a number of different things happening. So let's break that down and see how we can model our research after what's happening within this condition. Similarly, moving through to the actual kind of compound development, it was looking at how these particular compounds, each of them might have a particular impact on the lymphatic system, breaking that down into a different piece. Later in my career, very much so, looking at lymphedema from, it's not just tissue swelling and edema and all of these different things, or lymphedema, excuse me. It's also a holistic experience. What does this mean for the patient? What does this mean for their families? Some of my projects looked at, one of them looked at the viewpoint of lymphedema from healthcare provider perspectives. So always breaking things down and analyzing from multiple angles was certainly something that I had tried to do, and being able to test something out and learn from it. I think that's a really important component of my journey that I'm sure we'll talk about, is having the courage to make and own your mistakes and then learn from them, or try something out. And if it feels like, okay, that's not quite working, let's have a pivot moment, reanalyze, and figure out, what would be the next best direction to take with this particular pursuit. So it was a lot of, those types of things, and being able to categorize things in my mind in order to make these almost like bite-sized chunks take away from as we kind of chip away at the iceberg there. And it's, all of these small moments that kind of come together to create a larger picture, right?
And those smaller moments of first just breaking down this big, hairy, audacious goal into those smaller chunks, not just from a clinical side, but from an experiential side, is critical. But you also broke down just the way you went about doing it to help create momentum to lead to getting the funding, getting the lab. I mean, there's one thing to just understand the problem there, but there's a whole experience you went through as almost your own entrepreneur to some degree.
That's something that I continue to try to do now. And it goes down to, as a student, even like my note taking, it's like, if I can write it in smaller chunks over time, my brain processes that information very well and is able to build connections between, what might seem like isolated analyses or isolated life events, there is always an underlying principle or foundational component that can tie together all these different things and that we can learn from over time. At first, it was, I think, more subconscious, and now it's something that I realize, no, in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, to break things down, it's building bridges again, right? And whether that's through communication, whether that's with people, or whether that's in kind of life events, if we're able to build those bridges for ourselves, it really does create something that's special in terms of motivation and inspiration to keep pursuing our goals.
What I think of is modularity.
Yeah. Exactly. That's awesome. Yeah.
That where you've been able to really identify these small chunks, each of them are building blocks. It may not be clear initially as to where they necessarily fit, but they're important pieces. Mm-hmm. So then you are stacking them accordingly as you have intake of more and more information. There is this ability to then connect the dots and then realize where each of these modular pieces start to fit together. For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very much so having trust in that process, right? And making sure that, as much as things might get difficult and frustrating, or those dots aren't necessarily connecting up front, if you can have trust in that process and trust in yourself to create that change and to kind of tie those pieces together, that's really important. Because certainly our journeys don't happen overnight. Certainly parts of our journeys may happen overnight and important pieces, but again, they come together to create that mosaic.
One of your core strengths clearly is compassion and empathy, those soft skills side. How did you identify that was of value in what you do? Because most likely think of hard skills, particularly among researchers, as more important to succeed in their profession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think I look to often the origin of my work with the experiences I was having with my mom, not hearing piano being played in the house, or, working with my brothers to do different things as a family, because, it's very difficult for my mom to do these, what we call activities of daily living in a lot of regards. So realizing that compassion was truly the core of what started this all for me, that was the little bit of flame amidst a spark. And over time, realizing that was a source of stability as things in our lives continue to change. And along my journey, so much was happening over the course of those, especially those first couple of years, in terms of rapid change for me. If I was able to understand what my footing was when it felt like your head is in the clouds, type of thing, for me, I found kind of that solace in moments that I shared compassion or had compassion for someone else, whether that's my mom, whether it was that kind of family that I met at the science fair. It came down to that deep connection and that feeling of wanting to heal some of the pain that was most definitely present in the world in this particular way.
Catharine's pursuit of a treatment didn't happen overnight, and she's continuing to learn and grow. But by continuously collecting and researching relevant information, she's now able to build connections that might not have been initially evident. Yet that's where the white space opportunities lie. And as Catharine tells us, she didn't know how they would all connect, but she was determined to see where those threads of information would tie together. It's that shift from being singular to multidimensional, stepwise to end-to-end thinking that can open up a world of options that might not have otherwise existed. That's what has helped Catharine achieve that seemingly insurmountable promise she set out to fill. Where do you feel you've struggled most in your career journey to date? And what should you do to overcome it?
I think we had actually touched upon certainly one of those pieces of feeling like, oh my gosh, there's this big insurmountable idea that I want to bring into the world. How the heck am I going to do that? So that would be certainly my first big struggle of feeling like, how am I going to do all of this at 14 while I'm going to high school, while I'm involved in, volunteering and community events, things like that. And so it was breaking down into smaller chunks from that standpoint. And so being able to kind of go between my high school studies and then very much specific, specialized scientific topics. I was learning ecology at the same time I was learning, the disease processes of the lymphatic system, certain lymphatic pathologies. And so even that into itself, that dichotomy of feeling like, how am I going to make these pieces connect? It was always I think a challenge, but over time it started to really align for me. And I was developing that skill of connecting the dots over a period of time. I think another challenge I had was feeling like I wanted to, again, care for the whole situation, not necessarily just one line of whether that's drug development or just looking at, say, the psychological components of lymphedema. I wanted to create something that looked at the whole person and the whole experience. And so that took definitely a lot of collaboration and wonderful mentorship and creativity to be able to expand kind of the research efforts and program over time to bring those pieces in, to talk to people about what has lymphedema meant for you in your lifetime. How could we create change for you? What would make things, better for you? And then being able to take that knowledge and incorporating it into another arm of kind of my research pursuits. Oh, this person has said, I'm really interested in seeing what we can do from a surgical standpoint to treat lymphedema. Like, all right, well, I can certainly go and try to undertake a project that looks at how these new surgical interventions are impacting people, both from a symptomatic standpoint of these physical symptoms. But I'm always going to tie in, what does this mean for the human? So designing research projects and studies that looked at biomedical, kind of these biomedical lenses, but placed it within the context of the larger human. Yeah, to kind of help connect things as I was facing these challenges over time. Yeah.
Sounds like you broke down or you broke a lot of norms and some of those potential silos that existed before because of this purpose in ensuring that there was a more comprehensive view of the problem. But at the end of the day, it was always rooted in the person, the human face, versus it looking at from a very scientific orientation.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's I mentioned the compassionate bench scientist that was my 14-year-old self or 15-year-old self, recognizing that the human experience is, we're doing this work to improve the lives of others, and being able to truly use our science to do that, for me meant I wanted to place my research in the context of what it means to be a human being and what it means to traverse through these mountains that we face in life, whether that's, lymphedema, whether that's a young scientist trying to tie together multiple different things all at once, right? Yeah.
I see this very much as almost it's a customer experience oriented initiative where you looked at the whole end-to-end customer journey, but then integrated that science of trying to find the solution. So it's almost and taking some of those principles from technology, right? Because in tech, very much it's about building that user experience or customer experience and ensuring that that person is the focus all along the way, and identifying, the technology and the tools and so forth to accomplish the goal, and done in an iterative fashion.
Yeah, very much so. And I think asking the question, from a scientific standpoint of we have our objective outcome measures, whatever that might be. Why not add, say, like this qualitative component? Why not ask these people, your limb may have changed X whatever volume, but like, do you feel any different as well? And just being able to pair those pieces over time, it really does help you. It's more good quality data that you're able to put together and refine your, as you say, like your product, or refine the experience for someone to make it more comfortable, and bring a degree of hope and peace to people. Yeah.
What I love is that you really decided to go broad, and connect those dots, versus just going only deep, which I think in many instances has been more the norm, is that you really specialize and you focus on one, you optimize one, but you are looking at this being broad and deep and connecting the dots across everything. And to close, what advice would you tell others who are trying to create their ideal mashup that aligns to their own passion and potential?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I could say lots of lots of great things, but a big one for me is, we discussed getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and recognizing that the pathway to change isn't always a smooth go, but these kind of road bumps and these blocks along the way, they are, for the most part, they are surmountable. And if you're feeling like, how do I kind of keep myself grounded amidst all of this change or all of these barriers that I seem to be facing, really reflecting back on what is your intention, what is your motivation, and what are the core values that underlie your pursuits. And that kind of helps us to find solace in the moments that lead us into the unknown, really trusting in, this is what I believe in, and things will very much align if I can just keep the momentum going. And, I always say it as lead in love in the name of what we stand for. So that would be a big piece, certainly. And then adding in there, having courage as well. I think that's something we've talked about in the context of, say, the pandemic, the importance of courage in leadership and the importance of courage in entrepreneurship and creating change. It's that courage of making our decisions, courage to, at times, be disliked, enter into conversation and have differences with people, and realize that you can leave that conversation with many more commonalities than that one difference that might have brought you together. And just having courage to be, I guess, a source of light amidst darkness. So, yeah.
Great insight and advice. And finally, what's the best way listeners can connect with you?
Instagram, at Catharine Bowman. And always watch, there's an A after that H, not an E, from the Italian roots in the family. So Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. And then I'm just updating my website now. And so that'll be rolling out in the new year.
Well, thank you so much, Catharine, for being on the show today and sharing your mission-driven career mashup story based on compassion, thinking creatively, and bridging the gap.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Connie.
Catharine, like many of the guests I've had the pleasure of interviewing, was so inspiring because she had a personal goal she was looking to achieve and set her mind to accomplish it. It was this persistence in continuously researching and analyzing the information that led her to identifying potential opportunities to explore further. This ongoing process was broad and deep. That multifaceted and multidimensional way of evaluating the disease ultimately helped her connect the dots and enabled her to identify both a potential treatment for lymphedema and how to best support the patient. So as you begin your journey to create your own career mashup, focus on spotting the trends to see where there are holes to be filled, jobs to be done, and where you can deliver the most impact so you can reach your growth potential. Thanks for listening to Strategic Momentum. To connect with Catharine, you can find her on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And remember, it's Catharine with an A. To understand more about the future of work, what it means for careers, and most importantly, what to do about it to create your own unique career mashup like Catharine's, go to bizofyou.co to learn more about my new book, Building the Business of You. In the book, you'll learn how to employ a dynamic strategic planning process to help you be the CEO of you, while also discovering the compelling stories of other career mashuppers like Catharine that will inspire you towards action. The book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If you've liked what you heard on the podcast, please follow the show, and share this episode with friends and colleagues. And of course, we always appreciate ratings and reviews. You can also get show notes, links, and more tips and advice from this episode at strategicmomentum.co. I'm Connie Steele, and you've been listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast.